Want to get us started on time, being mindful of everybody's time, and thank you for getting here and being a part of our webinar today. We at SoCal ASLA thank you for being here. We also want to, of course, thank our guests, Shawn Maestretti and Leigh Adams. We're very excited that they're with us today. They are going to be speaking about regenerative landscape, and they have a lot of wonderful information to share with us today. So just a few housekeeping items. Leigh and Shawn will be speaking for about 45 minutes, and that will give us 15 minutes for a Q&A session. So as questions come up for you while they're speaking, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. We won't interrupt them during the presentation, but we'll have time for it afterwards. So don't worry if we're not stopping things to get to your questions. We'll do that all after. And we will be sure to get to as many questions as possible. I'm sure you will have plenty. Their information is amazing and super important in our world today. One thing that I want to note about Shawn and Leigh is that they do amazing work, and they do amazing work through their firm, but they also provide their services to large and small firms across the country. So keep that in mind as you're listening to what they're saying. They do consult, and that's a great thing because you know, we can't all be experts in this, if they are, and we can call on them for their expertise. And our webinars wouldn't be possible if it weren't for our sponsors. We want to thank our platinum sponsors, Park West, Avalon Amenities, Brightview, DSA Lighting, Rainbird, Victor Stanley, USA Shade, and our gold sponsors, who are Angelus Paving, Anova, Belgard, GPH Irrigation, Ironsmith, Maglin, Orco Block, Southwest Boulder and Stone, Stepstone, QCP, and Ackerstone. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Shawn and Leigh. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Just want to make sure you can hear us okay. Yep, great. Oh, I'm going to, I just did something, so forgive me. Oops. Stop video. Oh, where did my notes go? Forgive me just 1 second. All right.
Redo screen.
Pamela, can you just confirm that you can hear me?
Can hear you, yeah.
Great. Okay, great. All right. So thanks so much for being here today. We're super grateful to be sharing this with you. We just want to start off by saying there's nothing new under the sun. The solutions we're about to share with you have been available to us since the dawn of humans, and we just wish to reconnect you to that today. Leigh?
And before we start, I would like to ask us all to acknowledge the indigenous people that cared for this land, the ancestors who took care of this land as a member of their family. In the indigenous cultures, the earth and the living creatures, the water and the air, are beings that are part of a family, and we care for them as part of the family. And we're standing on Gabrielino land. We want you to know that diversity is the key. It's the key to a thriving future. And we at Studio Petrichor support justice for everyone and everything. As a community, we must encourage equitability, inclusion, and most importantly, the rights of nature.
We stand before you, lovers of plants and of nature. We can both agree that our exposure to nature in our formative years has influenced our work today. And as it turns out, if you're to become friends with plants and you're to become familiar with their counterparts, soil, carbon, water, biodiversity, all things are connected. And this is what supports community above and below ground. We're starting to run out of time. The global conversation is focused on the problems, and for good reason. We're in trouble, but we have solutions, and it's just a matter of implementing them. We know that protecting our soils, treating carbon as our frenemy, optimizing our water use, supporting biodiversity, and supporting community throughout all 5 kingdoms will help to offset the effects of climate change in the most beautiful way. I'd like to think that I might be a messenger from the past.
I think it is the future.
The humans have been living in a degenerative, destructive relationship with nature. Sustainability is a great effort, but isn't nearly enough. And if we want to start thriving alongside of nature in harmony, we must be thinking and acting regeneratively. Bucky once said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." We ask our audiences normally to ponder on this as we move through the presentation. In your case, we are design professionals. And whether it's your landscape or a landscape that you helped create or are nurturing, I'd ask you to ponder this question as we move through it. How does my landscape function? Or better yet, how does a landscape function in nature? And for more clarity, how does an ecosystem function? There's an important distinction between hardscapes we create and control versus the ones that rely on their natural, complementary, reinforcing, regenerative systems. But it's becoming more and more and more apparent that landscape design has been about landscape control. Colonization has always been about control. Colonization has unwittingly taught us how to control the landscape and one another, rather than living in harmony with the land. So how can we change that narrative? What we have learned from some close indigenous elders is that we plan and plant our gardens and then we just look at them. Where are the relationships? Where's the gathering, the gift giving, the community engagement?
We're experiencing accelerated entropy due to a warming climate and what is being called a positive feedback loop. Climate feedback loops are processes that can either amplify or diminish the effects of climate forcings. Oh, there's one. This feedback loop is wildfire. It's an example of a positive or worse feedback loop. More fire, more CO2. More CO2 in the atmosphere, more heat. Ooh, that's kind of overwhelming, bringing us to apathy is a real problem. In fact, the problem is so overwhelming, it's easy to shut down, to numb ourselves. This also includes hoping for the best, but not taking affirmative action. Real action, real hope is being in action. Most of us here know this, and we do not need to go into the science and proof behind global warming. However, if you guys would like a presentation solely on climate change, please let us know and we can schedule that. Sign up for our newsletter, reach out to us via the website, or follow us on Instagram. We will have details in the chat box.
So we are now spewing 110 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into the thin shell of our atmosphere every 24 hours as if it were an open sewer. The global warming pollution comes from a lot of sources. We're not going to concentrate on any one in particular. Agriculture has a lot to do with it, but it's also an important solution. Dislodging of CO2 from the soils, the mismanagement of agriculture, the burning of forests, and now the permafrost in the Arctic soil is beginning to thaw and release both CO2 and methane. But the main source is the burning of fossil fuels. We must shift our behaviors and our current ways of thinking. The average American has a 15-ton per year carbon footprint, and in order to stay below 2 degrees warming, we need an 87% change in behavior. So it's time to live differently, right? It's time to live regeneratively. There are so many ways we can do this in our homes and in our communities, but we're going to share how to reconnect with the land, help Mother Earth to regenerate. And this is an important opportunity to reimagine and reinvent how we, as landscape professionals and community members and municipalities, do things in our work and in our lives. So how do we start? Well, what is regenerative? Why is regeneration important? Well, it acknowledges the impact we've already had on the land and begins to address how we can restore and support living systems. You know, when you look at this diagram here, this degenerative basically means we've destroyed, deplete, reduce, and kill. And sustainability is basically just surviving and maintaining. Whereas regeneration is thriving, renew, recreate, abundance. Think about it. What is true sustainability? True sustainability isn't organic food imported from 3 states over. It isn't water piped from miles away. It isn't sending your recyclables to a factory that just burns more energy. True sustainability is the result of a regenerative model, which is making use of what we have. True sustainability is in our 2 hands, and it actually is outside in our backyard and in our community, in our open spaces. I love this diagram. I don't need to go into it, but just imagine a little sliding scale on how we can score our work. So, how do we start? We start from the beginning, in the soil. And there's an important distinction between soil and dirt. If we used half of what we spend on military, we could be regenerating the planet very fast. And I would hope that everybody in this chat room today understands the basics of soil, being 50% solid space and 50% void space, or we hope. But there's a small percentage of soil organic matter, and it's in that 5% where 95% of all land-based organisms exist, the soil food web. Microbial activity drives the process of aggregation, which enhances soil structural ability, aeration, infiltration, water holding capacity. All living things above and below ground benefit when the plant microbe bridge is functioning effectively. A plant root is very similar to our lower intestines. A plant acquires nutrients from outside and the other from inside. Having a healthy microbiome is essential to health for both plants and animals. Most people think that roots just take. That is not true. There's a big exchange there. And we want to talk about mycorrhizal fungi, our unsung hero. The hyphae of a mycorrhizal fungi is only a single cell wide, and it penetrates the root cell wall to facilitate nutrient exchanges between fungi and roots. The fungus receives sugars, and from the plant, in exchange, the plant receives certain nutrients, water, protection from pathogens, most importantly, information. Although ecologically influential, soil fungi are really fragile, so the use of fungicides, pesticides, inorganic fertilizers, and how we've been treating our soil can decimate their population. This is an image of mycorrhizal fungi just 3 weeks after one of our lasagna mulching workshops. This is one of our many efforts to support the underground community. It's so simple and so accessible to us. So I'm sure a lot of you in this epidemic, we've lost 1/3 of our farmable or arable land in just the past 40 years. This is not a local problem, it's a global epidemic. Desertification is a term that applies to the man-made destruction of the underlying soil resource to such a degree that it can no longer support life. Desertification is not only in or around a desert, it can occur anywhere. Desertification is not the result of drought, although droughts can exacerbate the process. It's a man-made phenomenon. And one key distinction here is that it's not droughts that cause bare ground, it's bare ground that causes droughts. We just want to leave you with this. Microbes rule the world. A healthy soil microbiome equals a healthy planet. So second, we create an alliance. Let's get comfy with carbon. Where there's carbon in the soil, there's water. Where there's water in the soil, there's life. And without that soil life, the soil food web, we are truly lost. We're not going to spend too much time here, but if you can make out on this carbon cycle map where carbon is coming down from the atmosphere, it's through the magical power of photosynthesis. Trees and plants are built from thin air. They are solar-powered carbohydrate-making machines that move carbon from the air and put it in the ground where it belongs. Without carbon and oxygen in the soil, microbes, fungi, and plant roots all working together, carbon is depleted from our soils. Water will run off, carrying topsoil, pollution, pesticides, and more. This ends up poisoning our waterways and our water supplies. The movement of carbon from the atmosphere to the soil via green plants represents the most powerful tool we have at our disposal for the restoration of soil function and the reduction of atmospheric CO2. In the upper left, excuse me, in the upper left corner is the microscopic image of a plant stomata. Its function is to absorb CO2 and release oxygen. We like to think of it as a CO2 monster. There's another powerful way to return carbon to the soil.
So hugelkultur, it's something we love, it's something we practice, and we want to teach as many people as possible about how to reuse these resources. Hugelkultur is German for mound or hill culture. What we're doing is replicating a forest floor ecology in a constructed manner in order to return carbon to the soil, harness moisture from the air, capture and store rainwater, and support more square footage of soil biodiversity. We like to start with a small trench for water to settle in and soak, but you don't have to. Then we always put cardboard in there. Cardboard is our invitation to mycorrhizal fungi. Like your children would prefer sugary breakfast cereal to healthy oatmeal, our mycorrhizal fungi would prefer cardboard to wood chips. Then we layer in as much green waste as we're removing from a property, tree trimming, mulch, palm fronds, and other chunky items. We layer that in with soil like a fine lasagna. Compostable packaging, yes, Amazon will take those cardboard packages and we will reuse them to build soil and harvest water. Other carbon materials, compromised wood, old firewood, we'll take it all. Then as we get above the ground plane and the finished grade, we're adding logs and larger branches, and then more green waste and soil. And now is where the function of the hugel is most effective. The thermal mass of the larger logs above grade will collect moisture from the atmosphere through condensation. Just as when you hold a cool glass of water in your hand on a hot day, the laws of physics force moisture out of its gaseous state and into a liquid state, and that runs down the edge of your glass. But if it happens on a log, that log pulls the moisture in through capillary action, and the hugel will hold on to that moisture. The plants will draw out the moisture through capillary action as needed, and you have an active and passive water harvesting system. Soil and plants are the finishing touch. We always incorporate a tree or large shrubs into the hugels to allow the roots to help create a foundational structure and move moisture through the hugel. Here's a hugel we built with the city of Pasadena and a community workshop. Let's watch this happen. The communities we build beneath the soil support the communities above the soil. Here are some different hugels in various our clients' yards. This is a hugel and swale combination. As moisture comes off the roof in rain events, it is channeled into this area and the hugel absorbs it. Every year and every event, it absorbs more as the mycorrhizal community grows. Here's one in the backyard where we're growing food, done at a community workshop. And another, as this hugel begins to take off, built in a community workshop. And yes, we can build hugels in places where they don't have access to soil and give children in every school and in every inner city area a place to grow and learn. So we can return carbon to the soil in other ways: mulching, composting, our favorite lasagna mulching. We use biochar, and rainwater harvesting is a fantastic feedback loop. Honor water and invite it to stay. What is currently happening? We want to acknowledge that water is life and it's a living being. And what is currently happening in the world with global warming is extraordinary. In Siberia this year, it's nothing short of remarkable. This summer, temperatures were above 100 degrees. So you are all professionals and you all know about water and how to use it, how much you're getting. You realize that for every 1,000 square feet of roof surface, 625 gallons of water can be harvested in a 1-inch rainfall. Where do we put that? How many 55-gallon rain barrels? Uh-oh.
We don't have time for that.
No, let's try something different. Ooh, bioswales, accompanied by a hugel, can take in massive amounts of water. Or look at that cistern. That became a glorious backyard with resources not just for the homeowner, but for the fire department. Here's a hugel we built in Shawn's backyard. This was done at a community workshop. Adjacent is the bioswale, taking in water from our roof and the neighbor's roof. And here it is just last month as it's grown in and become fruitful. Now it's even greener and more lush. So there are lots of other ways to optimize your water usage. Plant native and climate appropriate plants, gray water systems, permeable surfaces, support regenerative agriculture, and support fungi. There's research showing us that fungal spores in the atmosphere contribute to cloud formation. This isn't a joke. This is from Scientific American. That's why it rains more at my house than at Shawn's house, because I started before he did. How this works? Mushrooms spring up like tulips after a good soaking. They make spores that act as rain seeds. It creates a matrix over a property. More rain falls there because moisture condenses on that matrix and water falls. If changes in climate reduce rainfall in tropical ecosystems, the resulting inhibition of fungal growth and spore release may exacerbate the frequency of droughts through this unexpected feedback loop. Once we have the holy trinity of soil, water, and carbon working together,
biodiversity supported. Just know that the interconnected web of life is unraveling at an unfathomable speed, and the majority of the planet is not treating this as a crisis. Just know that native plants are the first line of defense in preventing habitat loss, and that insects are the link between plants and all creatures higher on the food chain. So I'm sure we're already working on this. We just need to emphasize supporting biodiversity even more so today. Our only hope is if we come together, all peoples, all sizes, and all cultures. The feedback loop can begin through community. We are living under the myth of separation, the myth of individualism, and the myth of human supremacy. These myths have been going on for some time. Separation is a story. It is not true. We are not separate from the earth. We are a singular ecosystem, undivided. Everything is interconnected, and we aim to reconnect what's been lost. So I imagine our current lifestyle or landscape model looking like a bowl with cracks in it. We waste and squander our most precious resource, water. We waste energy, continuously pollute our air and water and soils with byproducts. We import and create more waste, and of course, time is valuable as well. Communities are woven from the foundation and interdependence of carbon, soil, water, and biodiversity. But we must first start with soil. That's our priority. And without carbon in the soil, we don't have water. And when there's water in the soil, biodiversity is supported. And biodiversity spans across 5 kingdoms. And together, they create community. And it's that community that's the feedback loop. What if soil, carbon, water, and biodiversity were all given the same rights as humans have? At minimum, the right to exist and thrive. So here's an example of a negative or better feedback loop. So soil absorbs more water when carbon is present. We're supporting living soil, which supports plant life, which supports biodiversity, which supports a carbon cascade, and around as it grows. That is a thriving system. So the only way we're going to change the world is by changing ourselves and our day-to-day actions and behaviors. We keep talking about carbon emissions like they're our biggest problem, but they're not. Human behavior is our biggest problem. Human behavior causes carbon emissions. A series of solutions lie in your hands, in your pencils, in your AutoCAD program, and in your backyard. It's time to be proactive, not reactive. So here we go with a simple template we put together with our community members as ways we could be thinking about our garden design. Just imagine a landscape functioning as a living ecosystem supported by this inspiring interaction. You know, imagine a residential garden design incorporating these regenerative systems, practices, and principles such as rainwater harvesting, hugelkultur, land forming, a plant community approach. But in perspective, here we can see this. That's not terrible looking. It's pretty nice. But in this garden, we imagine we're nurturing living soil, capturing rainwater wherever possible, doing that using landforms such as hugelkultur and more. Of course, increasing permeability. I would love to see less concrete, less hardscape, and more nature, if possible. Plant community design is huge and is something we're working hard on understanding and developing further. And together, this supports all cycles of life for non-human and human beings for generations to come. So let's get into that garden. There's the rain garden on the left and our berm on the right. And let's add some hugelkultur. Do you see the smile? I see a froggy smile. Now, forever, you will think of a frog when you think of hugelkultur. When it rains, the rain garden fills up and begins to infiltrate, and water moves both gravitationally and laterally as that plant microbe bridge starts working together. And it supports the landscapes that we help co-create with nature. Carbon and pollutants are pulled into the soil before they end up in our oceans. But what else is this garden doing? It's cooling the environment. So this is from 1959 to 1988, and it's the NASA depiction of temperatures on the globe up until 1988. And I'm sure it looks a little bit more red than this now. At least 224 locations around the world set all-time record heat highs in 2018, and that's not stopping. Differences between plant materials, and hardscape surfaces, and that includes concrete, asphalt, decomposed granite, bare hardened soil, mulch. There's about a 40 to 50 degree difference. Here on the left is decomposed granite at the Arboretum on a 98-degree day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and very drought tolerant giant wild rye, a native plant to California. There is infrared evidence that plants cool our environment. And so it's important to understand that hot, bare soil, hardscape surfaces, concrete, asphalt all contribute to heat island, whereas cool, covered soil contributes to cloud formation. So in our work, here's an example of a residential project that we completed a couple years ago. When I walked onto the property and saw this pink and purple house, I knew these were my clients. They wanted a California native garden. But here's this fabulous 1938 colonial revival architecture. And I think about design and how do we honor the architecture and attempt to give it a full-on California native landscape. Well, the bones of the landscape are that of evoking the sense of a colonial revival design with those axial pathways and alleys of trees and other elements like that. But then we incorporated all of those regenerative practices like hugelkultur berms here. We changed the form of the landscape. We're capturing water, and on every project we do, we always do a hydrology map or analysis to calculate how much water is coming off, right? We all do this. But another thing we have to assess on our projects is what can we repurpose? All of this was going to head to a dump. There's a parking lot in the front yard, a hideous old flagstone pathway and patio, and trees that were sick and dying of drought and disease. And through creative collaboration and thought, we repurposed all of that material through saw cutting, creating grids, repurposing, almost a mosaic approach, but giving it that order and feeling and space that the clients really wanted. And here on the right, you see those hugelkultur berms being built. And this is what it looked like a couple months ago. And you see that plant community design approach. It's a very naturalistic landscape surrounding this very orderly, beautiful, pleasing landscape. Here's a fountain that we created using all that concrete from that front parking space. Even the side of the house looks like a wonderful place you want to spend time.
And that beautiful picnic table, that was from a liquid amber tree that needed to come down. And the client's nephew created that beautiful piece of furniture, honoring the life of that tree and creating a legacy for his uncle.
Thank you for that. I forgot about that. Yeah, so many ways we were able to repurpose and then enhance life. The numbers of pollinators and animals and wildlife that visit this garden are a pure joy to these clients. And wherever we can, we try to harvest that water and situate that next to the possibility of, storage tanks like hugelkultur, because it's water storage.
So the Crescent Farm at the LA County Arboretum is a 7/8 of an acre that I got to design on, and where community came together and did an extraordinary job. Shawn, look forward on here.
Yes, sorry.
So there it is without a label on it. This was started as a wildflower garden for one season. My agreement in taking it on was that I be able to demonstrate water optimization techniques like hugels and lasagna mulching. I was allowed 1 year in which to do this, and then it was to be over. 7 years later, this garden is thriving and is a major feature, often called the flagship of the Arboretum by the CEO. You're looking at an arid climate orchard, which now is off irrigation and it's only hand watered when needed. That was lasagna mulched 18 inches deep, and it created resilient soil. When we had a 118-degree day at the Arboretum 2 years ago, I'm sure everyone remembers that if you're in California, every tree in the Arboretum was scorched with the exception of these trees. They had resources available to them, not because we watered, but because they had an underground system supporting them. You see a bioswale there and an infiltration basin. You see a variety of different, there's the infiltration basin. You see a variety of different lawn substitutes. And yes, the blue grama grass is where the wild bees sleep. It's delightful.
Sorry, I had a little pause there.
Okay, what's fascinating on this is that that swale, that bioswale coming in, it's to the top left, was coming into this infiltration basin that I personally dug with a pick, first a shovel and then a pickaxe. I hit a layer of caliche, limestone, so thick and so hard that I had to use a pick to break into it. The first time the rain came and that filled, the water sat there. Oh my goodness, you can't have an infiltration basin without infiltration. So I laid out cardboard, I covered that up with mulch, and I strategically placed rocks in there so it looked like an infiltration basin. Within a few months, the mycorrhizal fungi in that cardboard and mulch, seeking to connect with tree roots, exuded acid through those tips, those growing tips, exude acid. They had eaten through the caliche layer, and water does not stay in that basin any longer than 20 minutes, even when it's filled to the top. The magic of mycorrhizal fungi. Here is a hugel. This hugel was over 6 feet tall. It also used the turf that was skimmed off of this 7/8 of an acre. We dried that turf out upside down, and we used it to build this hugel, 6 feet tall, and I don't know how many feet long, and giant trees that came down in the windstorm of 2011. This hugel is now 7 years old. It has been adopted by the Xerces Foundation as an exemplary form of supporting biodiversity and native insects, and it is never watered. Oh, and there's it looking pretty on a spring day, and you can no longer see the hugel. It is completely covered with native plants. The meadow also supports a dramatic amount of biodiversity, and it changes all the time.
So everything right now feels so big and so overwhelming, but in truth, the biggest impacts are the smallest ones. Every little change we make in our homes and our backyards has a ripple effect. So we believe that education and empowerment is the key to building that underground community, but it takes that above ground community to get it started. We at Studio Petrichor have been holding hands-on workshops in our community, teaching regenerative garden design, working with municipalities, and sharing this with people of all shapes, ages, sizes, and abilities. Wow.
200-pound log.
So here's some images of some of our workshops and what goes into it. You know, as landscape architects and planners and municipalities, there are large-scale opportunities to reclaim unnecessary hardscape and put your clients into the garden. That's our goal. We can do this in parks and open spaces, new developments, schools and campuses, even in existing underserved communities that are having a hard time. They lack trees. That's one place we can start, but we need to be able to support those trees. And then small scale opportunities, grassroots movements, you know, parcel by parcel, unused lots to residential garden design. Show your clients the value and legacy of the regenerative process. We are the educators. And community by community, we can help municipalities rewrite their protocols, not just the language of nature-based solutions, but we get into it with them. We've been able to open minds and see the results. So just a quick recap, moving forward, soil is our matrix, carbon is the gift, water is life, biodiversity is key, but community is the feedback loop. It's time we are proactive, not as reactive. Ask yourself, are we designing product gardens or process gardens? Get your clients into their gardens. It's all about the relationship with nature. Can we acknowledge our illusion of control and actually co-create with nature? Can we reimagine a new world, building reciprocal relationships with nature? Reciprocity, gratitude, and respect for the land is our way into a regenerative future. And if there's just a couple of things that we've learned from Indigenous wisdom that we must support, it's that just because it's not your fault doesn't mean you can't take responsibility. Reciprocity is the key to a successful relationship with nature. Humans have taken and extracted and disrupted without giving back. The gift we have been given must be returned. Nature is the real teacher, and all we need as students is mindfulness. I'd like to leave you with a quote today from environmental activist Joanna Macy. Until we can grieve for our planet, we cannot love it. Grieving is a sign of spiritual health, but it is not enough to grieve for our lost landscapes. We have to put our hands in the earth to make ourselves whole again. Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world is giving us moments of wonder and joy. We choose joy over despair, not because we have our head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives us daily, and we must return the gift. Find a deep connection to nature and ask yourself, are you gardening like your life depends on it? We are out of time. We must protest. We must take action. Action is hope. The landscape architecture profession is a powerful platform to practice and influence regenerative practices simultaneously. Land regeneration starts with people. It starts with those of us who are being hired to do the planning. We are the advocates, we are the voices, we are the leaders in the decision-making in so many cases. Join the solution revolution. You can sign up for our newsletter, follow us on Instagram at Garden Architect, or hire us. We're consultants, we wanna work with you. We wanna be a part of these projects. We're small but mighty. Thank you.
Thank you, Shawn and Leigh. That was fabulous. Just want to remind.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find the Zoom meeting.
Oh, no.
There we are. Okay, sorry. Can you hear me? Okay.
There you are.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You know, the whole time I was paranoid because I couldn't see anything. I was like, oh my God, can they even see us? So.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you, guys. Yes, it was fabulous, and the videos worked and everything went off perfectly. So it was great to see that. Moving that log video was pretty amazing, right? That's awesome. That was awesome. You know, you guys did such a good job that there's no questions. This is a first.
Did we overwhelm you? Did we overwhelm you? What's going on?
Oh my gosh.
I know
Well, you know, if you want to just send your love, you can send your love via the Q&A also. Please feel free to do that, or add something to the chat and that they can see. I will ask you a question while people are maybe thinking up theirs. I noticed when you were doing the hugel culture that you were sitting actually containers into that, like, I don't know, were they like 15-gallon containers or something like that? Can you explain what that's for and what you're doing there?
Yes, we actually use all sizes of containers depending on what types of plants we're going to be planting, or if we're building a hugel that will have Oyas in it. We can reserve space for an Oya, and then once the process is completed and people aren't running around and climbing on the hugel, we can backfill those spaces with plants as Oyas as planned.
Okay, and what's an Oya?
And oh, good. And Oya is a water optimization device used in southwestern United States, northwestern Mexico, used in the Middle East, in all desert cultures that have ceramics. Use a low fire porous clay, a shaped jar like that, that allows water to leach out slowly. The plants draw it out through capillary action, and it's a perfect adjunct to a hugel.
Oh, that is really cool. Okay, I've got a couple questions here. What are your thoughts about on-site composting?
That's what it is.
That is actually what a hugel is on-site composting. We have a hugel that we created with an opening in it that has a plastic bucket in it. There's no bottom in the bucket. And we use bokashi methods of anaerobic composting and compost our dog poop.
Hashtag Pukashi.
Pukashi.
TM.
So yes, we do a lot of all different kinds of composting, but composting is always site specific.
Yeah.
It just depends on where you are and what the regulations are. But we're very big on it.
That's very cool. I've got lots of thank yous from lots of people coming in. Great info. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Shawn, for the hashtag Pukashi. Okay. So hugels aren't the only way to do on-site composting.
Oh no, many different ways.
Okay.
That's just a very low maintenance way of using a lot of biomass at one time and creating a structure that harvests water for you.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to be clear on that you know, hugels are an opportunity to sequester trash. Right now in the time of COVID, who isn't ordering takeout a little bit more or a lot more? Pizza boxes and other carbon-based takeout containers and egg cartons and trash. I even have old pairs of pants, depending on what they're made of, put into the hugel culture. So it's about reducing the amount of waste that we let leave our house and keeping it in-house.
And we look at what the purpose of the hugel is. If we're growing food, then we are very picky about what goes into it. If we're growing native plants, we still are picky about what goes in there, but less so. We might have cardboard that has a little bit of color in it, which we avoid in our food hugels.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha. I have a question here. It says, thank you. This was very educational. May I ask if there are any specialized maintenance that you may do for hugel culture? Will there be any future need to replenish the compost within it?
Oh, great. A hugel is a 20-year construct built if well built. This is the most valuable tool, a hydrometer. This is what I want you to see. A hydrometer that is 18 inches deep so that you can test the soil moisture below logs, around plants, and get a much better, in any garden, not just in a hugel, but particularly in a hugel. That is a valuable tool.
I want to add that the hugel culture is not a perfect construct. Sometimes there's a little bit larger air pocket, smaller air pockets. Some portions hold on to a little bit more moisture and some are dry. As landscape architects, we're meant to prepare planting plans, and let's just say we included a hugel culture berm and you specified all these plants that you might not be able to plant because there's a log in the way, you know? So that's where those little pots come in, right? So we plan for a plant community. So when we plan, and wonderful company Land Effects and their abilities to create those wonderful planting plans, we can create plant communities and hatch them rather than plant specific, except for, of course, the occasional large tree. You saw that 15-gallon container where we had a redbud tree planted in there. So when it comes to planting design for a hugel culture, we think more along the lines of a plant community approach. And really, we're testing to see what works. Our garden here is a laboratory, and we hope to open it up for, you know, guests at some point soon.
And as we talk about encouraging your clients to be in relationship with the garden, seeing a client with the hydrometer in their hands move from testing the hugel, which they can then see doesn't need the extra water they're adding to it, perhaps. Sometimes it may. But we see them move around the rest of their garden as they begin to recognize the significance of the life in the soil as opposed to just what they're seeing above ground.
I'd like to point out that Nicole said it's so important to share how we can work with, on smaller scale and within communities to apply these concepts. But I just want you to know that this can be done on large scale projects as well. We create berms already, but just imagine successful water harvesting living berms that are placemaking in our larger park projects. These will subside, they will shrink over time, but that's over decades really. And so we can be thinking about these regenerative practices on all scales of projects because we have to, it's global.
Mm-hmm. We've got one more question. Oh, go ahead, Leigh. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, just think about how many parking lots are out there displacing water and not dealing with that water. It's going into the drain and into the rivers and out into the ocean. If that water were harvested through bioswales and absorbed in hugels before there was an overflow, we could increase the health of our aquifers immensely.
Yeah, and water holding capacity. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got another question. So how does hugel culture affect nitrogen for the plants?
Oh, great. We use a lot of different things. So that's when we speak of layers like lasagna. We are adding green waste in there. We're also using bamboo vinegar. We are also layering in, the mulch is a green and brown mix. That's our local tree trimmers supply us with that. So we are actually building a fairly balanced nitrogen carbon ratio as we build the hugels. What we find when we deconstruct one is that the plants are not where you think they would be. We think of them moving into the interstices between the logs. Instead, you find those roots have found the bark, moved underneath the bark of the log, where they can draw moisture out of the wood, but they can also break down the bark with the help of microorganisms and extract the nutrients that they need. So it doesn't take very long to jumpstart a hugel from a construct and into a living system.
That's really interesting. What would you say is the I would say the least width that you could create a hugel type berm? I'm thinking of my front yard specifically, where the street level is below my front yard, so to speak, and there's a significant berm there. So how would you problem solve that sort of situation where there's a narrow amount of frontage, so to speak, that people could walk on and be a part of?
So we look at it this way. Adding any carbon to the soil is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
How your hugel culture berm is built, from what you see on the internet, there's a lot of pages and a lot of folks doing it, and all of it, carbon in the soil, perfect.
Yes.
That's where it belongs, right? Our goal is to get them up high, oriented towards the southwest facing moist winds in our case here,
Mm-hmm.
and they also act as a windbreak in the back. So the higher you bring that, Leigh equates it to having a kite, which she'll explain. We're harvesting water out of thin air year round, just a little bit, but it's enough to support plant life. And then when it rains, it soaks it up.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to use the analogy of we want to get those logs as high as possible in the air. We can build passageways through if needed, but the higher we get those logs, the more moisture we're going to capture. If you're going to fly a kite, you don't start it from lying down on the ground. You lift it up or have someone lift it up so you get to run and your kite flies. Gravity is always going to pull the water down. We want to get as much harvesting ability as we can.
And it's working. A lot of the hugels, especially the native ones, which I barely water here in the back garden, I barely have to water them, and they harvest just enough to keep the plants going. And our goal is to create these landscapes with minimal resource input, like precious resource imports such as water, input such as water, and still achieve evoking nature. Because we love to see those images. We love to be out in nature, yet when we come into our landscapes, we attempt to control that. And that's where we've gone wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good point. Let me see if we have any more questions. I think we are out of questions. What I've done on the chat, just for everybody, I've placed a couple times the Studio Petrichor website, their Instagram, for both Shawn and Leigh, and also an Eventbrite that talks about, is it Shoshugiban?
Shosugiban. It's not a talk about, it's hands-on. There's only a few
It's the
spots.
workshop, that's right. Did I say a talk? No, nothing with them is usually ever a talk. It's usually always hands-on.
You got the only talk.
Yeah, right.
We want to get you into action, and that's what we try to do, is get our communities into action. But we're going to be burning wood, hardening it with fire, preparing it. We're building a fence, but you get to be a part. I mean, how wonderful is it to just sit and burn things for a little while?
And why do we do that, Shawn?
Because it feels good.
And it is also makes your fence or wood fire resistant, and we're in a high fire area.
Oh,
and
it's more than just burning stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, the Shosugiban is preparing your wood for fire resistance, water resistance, bug resistance, and weather resistance. And in an area where we are up in Altadena, this is a high fire risk area. Those fence lines are combustible. So we're just thinking of how we can also make our homes defensible with these regenerative practices.
We can also build planter boxes with that wood that are moisture and insect repellent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, if you look
I need that in my backyard.
if you look up Shosugiban architectural and see homes built across Europe with it, it is extraordinary.
That's really cool. Yeah, it is really beautiful, really beautiful. I was just saying, my husband was listening at the same time, and I was saying, now I know where I'm taking all my Amazon boxes, and right, I can bring them over. After I get done doing something here, we'll have to challenge the system of my site here with my slope and then small amount of frontage to see what I can.
I know it's not a major job creation, but if you know of anybody out there that used to go and pick up tons of cardboard and try to sell it, which isn't happening right now because they're not recycling it, they could be making money selecting, picking up, and sorting, and even removing the plastic and tape off of the boxes, and making
a lot more money.
a lot more money by taking it to some of the projects, because you can't have too much cardboard. And you're transforming it into soil while controlling weeds, building healthy soil, inviting mycorrhizal fungi, and so much more.
Oh, very, very cool. Very cool.
We're trying to put together this network. And so if anybody out there in the Zoom world knows of anybody, let us know. Yes. Okay. And now you have it, and you have their email, or you have their website. Yeah. You have their, did you give your email? Yes. I'm looking down at the thing. Yeah. Their email and the workshop. Yeah. And Shawn and Leigh are reminding you, it is supposed to be hot this weekend. They're going to start everything early to try to get everybody in and out before the heat. Everybody does social distance. You would bring a mask. And there's a little garden tour at the end. Yeah, it's about safety, and it's about the health of the soil and the health of each other as well. So there will be. Sorry, I'm so sorry. There will be 4 upcoming hugelkultur building workshops in the Pasadena-Altadena area coming up starting in September and going all the way into winter. So if you want to stay tuned on our newsletter, usually gives you an update on what we're doing, which comes out every other week, or you just visit our events page on our website. Yeah. Yeah, I would recommend if you are not currently getting their newsletter, sign on. It's always very inspirational, I guess is the way I'd put it. Informative, super educational,
It just makes us better designers and landscape architects. Well, I am going to be mindful of everybody's time. I want to thank you guys so much for your time, Shawn and Leigh. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, everybody that showed up. Just as a note, if you want to go back and review this, we will put this webinar on our website, the ASLA SoCal website. Please remember that Leigh and Shawn are available for consulting purposes. And we definitely need more of their work in the world, I think. Continuing this conversation about making our world and therefore each other healthier is so important right now.
And what's most important, that this is not a competition, this is a collaboration. We're only going to get through this together.
That's right, absolutely. So thank you guys for collaborating with us today and being a part of this wonderful, wonderful webinar. Stay tuned. We're going to keep them coming because we are social distancing for a while via Zoom, it seems. Stay tuned. We'll hopefully have more of this wonderful thing. And Leigh, one more thing, yes.
I do have one more thing. Vandana Shiva was here this spring just before the COVID shutdown. And she cautioned us, stop using the term social distancing. What we need is physical distancing. What cohesion and community is what will get us through this. So we slip into dominant culture language of social distancing. We are doing physical distancing.
Physical distancing. That's great.
Except for us, because we're so close.
Yes. Well, they are a pod. That is one reason they are not in masks. I should say that they are.
We practically live together. It's all good. We take care of each other.
They are. They otherwise they would be physical distancing, right? See, I'm a quick study.
Yes.
Okay, everybody, have a great day. Have a great rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and yeah, that's about it.
Call us.
Have a great day.
Call us.
Yeah, call them.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.